So we were talking about target sites for lipid and water-soluble hormones. And I mentioned that lipid-soluble hormones, once they leave the blood, they go directly through the plasma membrane and they enter the target cell and bind to their target receptor within the cell. So here we see a lipid-soluble hormone or lipid-soluble molecule, and it's bound to a carrier protein. So albumin is one of our carrier proteins. Once it finds its target cell, it unbinds, leaves the blood, goes directly through the plasma membrane, and it binds to its receptor inside the cell. And then it's going to activate or inactivate different activities of the cell: transcription, translation, so that it can do whatever function it's supposed to, maybe producing aquaporins, or maybe reducing the number of channels in a cell, whatever it is going to do. Make sense? Or I hope it makes sense, because I'm not actually there to ask you if it makes sense. But if it doesn't, you can always come see me. Here's a video of lipid-soluble activity.
Aldosterone is a lipid-soluble hormone that can easily diffuse through the plasma membrane. Inside the cell, aldosterone binds with an aldosterone receptor molecule in the cytoplasm. The aldosterone receptor complex moves into the nucleus and binds to DNA. The binding of the aldosterone receptor complex to DNA stimulates the synthesis of messenger RNA, which codes for specific proteins. The messenger RNA moves from the nucleus into the cytoplasm and binds to ribosomes, where it directs the synthesis of specific proteins. These proteins produce the response of the cell to aldosterone.
All right. Water-soluble hormones then can't get through the plasma membrane because they are water-soluble, which means they are polar. So they're going to free flow through the blood to their target cell as dissolved molecules, and then they leave the blood and they bind to their receptor, which is on the surface of the cell. Once they bind, they can activate a G protein. The G protein, once it is activated, is going to activate the conversion of ATP to cyclic AMP, which cyclic AMP acts as a second messenger. And cyclic AMP is going to turn on and off different functions of the cell, just like the hormone would do if it was inside the cell. Another messenger we can use is phospholipase C. Well, actually, phospholipase C is a protein that gets activated from the G protein. So, and what it does is it activates the production or the release of lots of calcium. So once phospholipase C is activated, it produces a molecule called IP3, and that molecule then causes the calcium release from the endoplasmic reticulum. When calcium is released, calcium ions can actually act as a second messenger, or actually they'd be considered the third messenger, because the IP3 would be the second messenger. And they're going to turn on or off different activities depending on what the cell, what the hormone would do for that cell. Here's a video on your second messenger activity.
When a signal molecule, such as epinephrine, binds to a cell surface receptor protein, it activates a G protein on the inside of the cell. The G protein then stimulates adenylyl cyclase to produce large amounts of cyclic AMP within the cell.
Okay, I want to stop just quickly. I want to mention the G protein is not the second messenger. It is what is activated when the hormone binds to the receptor. So it is the link between the first messenger, the hormone, and the second messenger, the cyclic AMP.
alpha kinase, which adds phosphates to specific proteins in the cell. The effect of this phosphorylation depends on the identity of the cell and the proteins that are phosphorylated. Calcium ions also serve as second messengers. In response to a signal molecule from other cells, the cell surface receptor protein activates a G protein, which in turn activates the enzyme phospholipase C. This enzyme catalyzes the production of inositol triphosphate, which diffuses through the cytoplasm to the endoplasmic reticulum. The inositol triphosphate binds to and opens the calcium channels, allowing calcium ions to flow from the endoplasmic reticulum into the cytoplasm. The calcium ions trigger proteins sensitive to calcium to initiate a variety of activities.
So, hormones have multiple receptor cells typically. Depending on the type of cell that we're looking at, you might have multiple receptors on the same cells, or you might have very few receptors, depending on the amount of hormone in the system, the amount of hormone needed at the time. And so receptor production is going to fluctuate depending on what we need. So upregulation is going to increase the number of receptors on each target cell. Downregulation decreases. So here we see very few hormones in our system, which might activate upregulation so that all the hormones that are in our system can bind and cause reactions. Here we have a lot of hormones in our system, and so we might downregulate to decrease the amount of hormones we need or that we have in our system because we don't need as much. In both cases, you're going to have the response that you need from the hormones. I think of this, one of the hormones that is produced by the hypothalamus is called oxytocin. And when we are not pregnant, so this is for females, our uterus is going to have lower numbers of receptors to oxytocin. We don't need to have as many receptors for oxytocin. Oxytocin functions in helping to activate uterine contractions, so smooth muscle contractions. So if we have a lot of oxytocin receptors, then we're going to have uterine contractions when we're not pregnant. Makes sense? So when we get pregnant, then we're going to start upregulating to increase the number of receptors on our cells so that we can, towards the end of pregnancy, have enough receptors to bind all of the oxytocin that we have. That we can have nice strong reactions or strong contractions. So hormones that are released can have different effects on the body. And some hormones are going to work together really effectively. They're going to be considered synergistic hormones. Our follicle stimulating hormone and our sex hormones like estrogen or testosterone, they help us to produce egg or sperm, depending on what we're looking at. And so they are considered synergistic hormones. Some are called permissive hormones, where they enhance another hormone. So they work on our cells, and then another hormone can work even more efficiently. The best example of this that I know of is estrogen prepares the uterus for the activity of progesterone. So our uterus gets prepared for progesterone, and then when fertilization occurs, progesterone is going to increase the thickness and of the functional lining of the uterus. Antagonistic effects occur when two hormones do opposite jobs. So an example for this would be insulin and glucagon. One raises blood glucose levels, one lowers blood glucose levels. So they are antagonistic of each other. I'm going to start going over the different endocrine organs. I like to start with the pineal gland. It's just a tiny little gland in the epithalamus region. And we talk about it a little bit when we talked in chapter 13 about the epithalamus. But here I'll talk a little more about it. And then we're going to talk about the hypothalamus and the action on the pituitary gland. So the pineal gland is a tiny little pea-looking gland. And its major function is to produce a hormone called melatonin. Melatonin functions in helping us wake up in the morning and be awake and aware, and then be sleepy at night. So during sunlight hours, melatonin is not secreted. But at nighttime, when it gets dark, the darker it gets, the more melatonin is secreted into our system. And this makes us drowsy, makes us tired. Then as we move towards the daytime again, the lighter it gets, the less melatonin our brain or our pineal gland produces, and we wake up again. So this helps us, maintain normal sleep-wake cycles. It also helps us to be active during the day, inactive at night when we're supposed to sleep. So we have like a regular schedule. One problem with this hormone, though, is that it is associated with the sunlight rays. So if there's no sunlight, typically people get more tired. And as we move towards the darker days, the shorter days towards winter, we become more and more tired earlier on. A lot of times this leads to a disorder called SAD, or seasonal affective disorder, where you have a depression in the wintertime and you just feel kind of blah. A lot of people feel that way, which is why people tend to put on weight in the wintertime. People like to curl up with a warm blanket and a cup of hot cocoa and lay on their couch and read or watch a movie versus going outside and shoveling slipped snow or something. Not that, I guess, shoveling snow is that exciting, but you'd be much more willing to go outside and do yard work in the summertime than in the wintertime typically. And a lot of this is due to this increase in melatonin. And things we can do to decrease the amount of melatonin in our system is to go under UV radiation lights. So tanning would work, but there are actual photo lights that you can use to help you decrease the amount of melatonin in your system, which would then increase your awakeness and you'd feel better. I'm going to stop here. We're going to start on the hypothalamus in the next video because I'm close to the end of this video period, okay? I will see you in just a few minutes. Bye.